And welcome back to This Week. I'm pleased to be joined by Nashville mayoral candidate Bob Clement. Number one, number two, you've made it to the runoff. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, Bob.
A very close election last night.
Very close. Photo finish.
When you get into a contest that is this close, obviously you know you've been in these contests before. In order to win the next election, you're going to have to get some voters who didn't vote for you. How do you do that?
Well, I've been reaching out immediately to Howard and Buck and David and Ken and others, and asking them to help me, as well as their supporters. And our surveys are showing that the vast majority of their supporters lean in our direction, but you can't take anything for granted because people like to be asked, and I'm sure asking them.
You had a big field going into the general election, just two of you now, and the runoff election. How does your campaign strategy change in this regard?
Well, we're down to two of us now. Both of us have records. Both of us have taken positions on various issues. And when you have a field of seven, it's almost impossible to talk about the differences and comparisons. That doesn't mean it's negative,
sure,
because it doesn't have to be negative, but you ought to tell the truth, because we do have some major differences on taxes and crime and other issues.
At your victory speech the other night, you came out challenging your opponent, talking about him being out of step, talking about his opposition to a referendum that was passed by, as you said, 77% of the electorate here in Davidson County, talked about him spending a lot of his own money trying to buy the election. Are those negative attacks, or are those talking about his record?
It's talking about his record. For example, Carl Dean, as Director of Law, says that the people of Nashville, it'd be against the law for the people of Nashville to vote on taxes, property taxes for the future. We've had two major property taxes in recent years. It's driving people out of Nashville. A lot of people, senior citizens included, living on fixed incomes are having a very, very difficult time. And 77% of the people think that you ought to at least have a right to vote on those issues, but Carl Dean says you don't have that right, and I think he's totally out of step when he talks in those terms.
You've talked about wanting to bring the city from good to great, and during your speech the other night before your supporters, you really talked about the immigration issue, gang issue, education issue. Are those your three really top priorities as you go into this runoff election?
Well, they are, and they're very, very important to all of us because illegal immigration has really grabbed us now. And we hadn't gotten much cooperation like we should have. And I'm in full support of our sheriff, Sheriff Darren Hall, for when he finds people that have been detained and have broken the law, we ought to find out whether they're legal or not. And if they're not legal, we need to have them deport them. We deport them, and I'll help him in every way I possibly can.
You got quite a round of applause when you talked about taking down illegal gangs, taking down gangs that have been causing crime in this area on 2nd Avenue, other parts downtown.
Well, Bob, we got over 3,000 young people that are part of gangs now, and a number of them are very, very violent. And a lot of them have dropped out of high school. 30% drop out, half of them in the 9th grade. That's why I want to bring vocational education back in our schools. You got to give young people hope. You got to give them an opportunity to turn their lives around, and I'm going to give them that option.
As close as the election was going into the runoff, what do you say to voters as you go on the campaign trail now to convince them that you're the man to run this city?
Well, they know I've got the experience. You know, I've been on the Public Service Commission, TVA, college president, a member of Congress. So I've got all those experiences. I've got those contacts from the past. But people do ask me, Bob, well, why do you want to be mayor? And that's a fair question. I love this city. I have deep roots in Nashville, and I can make a difference in people's lives and their pocketbooks. I want to keep taxes low. I want more jobs and better jobs for our people. I want to put more emphasis on tourism, and I want major riverfront development, which we can have for the future.
As you know, historically, unfortunately, runoff elections tend to attract fewer voters than even the election prior to that. How do you keep voters energized? How do you get them to the polls polls in the next 40 days to make sure they do vote?
I think some of my statements the last 24 hours might help some too, because I am charging it up and I am energizing the campaign, and I do stand for something, and I do have a record that I'm proud of what I've accomplished in the past. But it also comes down to field organization. I mean, getting on the phone and calling people and say, remember September the 11th? I don't think any of us will ever forget September 11th, because I was at the U.S. Capitol when all that happened. But remember September the 11th. Vote in this election. This is a very important vote. We're at the crossroads, and people ought not to stay home, because it does affect your life and your pocketbook.
Is this election coming down to the two candidates, or is it coming down to the records and the responsibilities of those two candidates?
I think both. I do have a vision. Matter of fact, I've even written a book called Good to Great, because I wanted to give specific, detailed plans of what Bob Clement's going to do in the future, and everyone can visit my website, bobclement.com, and get more information.
Finally, sir, you've talked about the issues in this race. Is there one key, one really important issue you think is going to turn this election?
Well, I think we talked about taxes a while ago, Carl Dean not giving people the right to vote when it comes to future tax increases, but also I think it's crime. While Carl Dean has been representing the worst of the worst criminals and being paid by the taxpayers to do that, and remember, he talks about me being a professional politician. He's been in government the last 20 years. And he's no outsider. I'd be the outsider rather than him, and he's been in the private sector 1 year. And so I think those are major differences. While he's represented the criminals, I've been fighting for the little guy. I've been fighting for people in Congress and the Public Service Commission and TVA and making a difference in people's lives. And I think those two distinctions are going to be pointed out loudly and clearly as the campaign progresses.
Bob Clement, candidate for mayor of Nashville, we appreciate very much your time, and good luck during the campaign, sir.
Thank you, Bob.